Emoji and her boyfriend both met as cosplayers. She was a fan of him online for a long time, but there was one convention where Emoji and her crush were both cosplaying, and they ended up in the same restaurant. Emoji kept turning around to look at him, but she never worked up the courage to go over. The next day, they ended up cosplaying the same character, so Emoji used it as an opportunity to start a conversation. After that, they started talking almost every day over Skype. One night, Emoji and some friends, including her cosplay crush, were playing Truth or Dare. Emoji dared him to date her, and he freaked out and said yes. They've been dating for 3 years since.
Sweet Commando and his friend were playing Truth or Dare, and Sweet Commando chose Dare. I mean, that's kinda obvious, right? The dare was to blast porn audio out loud in the talent show by connecting to the Bluetooth speakers. The dare was sweetened with a $15 bet, and his name is Sweet Commando, so we accepted. He got to the talent show early to prepare and connect to the speaker. The first act to go on was a group of 5 girls singing Call Me Maybe. When they started singing, Sweet Commando connected to the speaker and started playing the porn audio. Everyone in the talent show started laughing like crazy. The next day, Sweet Commando's friend gave him the $15 and everything went back to normal. But in 4th period, the loudspeaker came on, saying that the school bully had to go to the principal's office. It turned out the bully was suspended for 2 weeks because he told his friends that he set up the talent show prank to impress them.
When Tulip was around 20, he was dating a girl long distance. The day the two finally met, they rented a hotel room together and got straight to the business. In an effort to sound sexy, Tulip leaned down and whispered into her ear, "I'm gonna wreck it." He totally forgot about Wreck-It Ralph. Needless to say, he was embarrassed. Later into their escapade, she returned the favor and whispered to him, "Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?" It made him laugh so hard that they had to stop.
Melissa hated her high school science teacher, not because she was mean, but because she was a really, really bad teacher. She sucked at explaining things and was totally oblivious to everything that happened in her classroom. For example, one time a student faked a power outage by turning off the lights. The stupid teacher thought this was real and dismissed everyone for the day. Another time, the entire class got away with cheating on their final. The teacher somehow didn't notice that every student had put the same answers. Finally, one day, all the students except one threw a bunch of paper planes at her while her back was turned. When she turned around, she blamed the one student who didn't do it and gave him a detention. The students ended up writing a letter to the principal to get rid of her.
One day, Emoji was in a home economics class making spaghetti and meatballs. He was working alongside a friend who was sensually rolling his mints into balls. The friend then gave Emoji this amazing piece of advice.
When you cook, make your actions as sexual as possible. It makes the food taste better.
You know, if I was to guess, I'd say if anything it would make it taste worse.
When Sweet Commando was in the 4th grade, he started hanging out with some bad older kids. One time, one of them offered Sweet Commando $100 to go running through the school, opening every door, and shouting, "Dildo!" They told Sweet Commando a dildo was a type of bread that Italian bakers would walk down the street shouting about. Sweet Commando did the dare, but only made it to 5 classrooms before he was caught. He got 2 weeks of detention, but the worst part was, he didn't even get paid.
When Nixium was in high school, this guy tended to pick on him for no real reason. One day he pushed Nixium completely out of the blue and he pushed him back. Then with no warning, the bully punched him above his left eye and he fell backwards. Nixium was bigger and stronger than his bully, so he could have easily beaten him to the ground, but he decided to be the bigger man and walk away. Later on, after he told the teacher what had happened, the bully apologized and never picked on him again. Although he does still kinda regret not punching him back at least once.
When Dolan was in high school, there had been a string of violent attacks, so the principal installed metal detectors at the entrance to the school. Whenever the metal detector went off, students had to remove any jewelry or piercings or whatever that they had. One day, he was at the detectors waiting for a friend to pass through when a kid walked through with all sorts of body piercings. He was told to remove them, so he did, and he went through the arc. When it went off again, the kid said, "Sorry, it's my other piercing." The operator held out his hand, demanding whatever it was. The student, now fed up with this whole stupid situation, reaches into his pants and undoes the piercings from his ball sack, and he put the piercing right in the guy's hand, and he walked on through. The operator looked so embarrassed, and so he just passed the jewelry back and didn't say a word.
Some years ago, the Eurovision Song Contest was held in Sidious's home country. He was on his way home from boarding school and lined up at the train station to buy a ticket. A 40-something-year-old woman ran in and asked the person in front of Sidious if he would buy a ticket for her. He didn't speak their language, so she ended up asking him instead. She was going to see Eurovision, but her train was arriving soon and she needed a ticket now. She gave Sidious $100, even though the ticket only cost $20, and told him to buy the ticket for her. When it was his turn, the woman just cut in line and bought the ticket herself. Sidious asked her if she wanted her money back, but she said he could keep it as a thanks for his help, even though he didn't really do anything.
One day, Dolan was innocently stocking shelves at his grocery store when he noticed a customer walking by, mumbling to himself. The customer spotted Dolan and swooped in, coming uncomfortably close to Dolan's face. Then, looking around to see if anybody was looking, the customer leaned in and whispered into Dolan's ear, "Do you know where I could find some peanut butter?" Dolan was freaked out, but managed to point him in the right direction. The man whispered, "Thanks," and then walked away. But before he reached the end of the aisle, he turned back, put a finger to his lips, and whispered, "Don't tell anyone." Dolan vows to take this weird peanut butter secret with him to the grave. When Sid was 12, he went on a road trip with his family to see his grandma. On the way there, they stopped at a mall for a bathroom break. Sid walked into what he thought was the men's bathroom, and he did his business. When he came out to wash his hands, he looked up and saw over 10 girls staring at him like he was a creep. Sid turned bright red and walked out as fast as he could. When he got out, he looked at the sign on the door, which had the girl symbol.
One day in science class, Spinal Palm saw a kid drawing dicks in his notebook. The student sitting next to him pointed this out, and the kid immediately denied it. More kids started pointing and accusing him. Before long, the entire class was doing it just to stir him up. Before the teacher could come over, the kid got up without saying a word. With tears in his eyes, he walked over to the corner of the room and smashed his head through the window. Then he stormed off to the nurse's office. Spinal Palm and the entire class, they couldn't laugh, they were just stunned. The kid was okay after his insane overreaction, but the poor window had to be replaced with a piece of wood. I don't even think free pancakes would cheer up this emotionally broken window.
Shima went to an interview at a company that sounded pretty dope. It was in a nice building in a nice part of town. She was dressed professionally, she had her resume and references ready, and she walked in feeling confident. But she didn't expect what was waiting for her behind the door. The room was full of people waiting to be interviewed. Some of them had been there for over 2 hours, and the staff that was supposed to be interviewing were something. There was a woman walking around in an oversized man's t-shirt with no pants on. There was some sort of movie blaring in the break room, which caused whoever was in the other room to shout into a phone. This then made whoever the hell was in the break room turn up the volume even more, so it was just a big shit show. But the worst part by far, was this one guy. He was just some dude, and he was going in and out of the room, and he was slowly licking gummy bears off the palm of his hand, and giggling. Disgusting. Then he would stop and look at Shima and some of the other women, before going in and out of the door that went from the office to the hallway. She was only there for half an hour, and then she left.
So there was this one girl who Salty Squid thought would be super fun to spark a friendship with, and was super nervous about starting a conversation with her. One day, he found her standing alone, so he went up to her. In a dead serious voice, he said,
"I know you're not hot. It's because I'm your biggest fan."
She just walked away and didn't speak to him for a few days. Later, they started talking again, and now they're best friends.
One time, when Ramona was little, her brother wore an Ozzy Osbourne shirt that had spikes coming out of his skull. When she saw the shirt, Ramona told her brother that it scared her. So he told her that Ozzy just had a disease called Wantan Kenobi.
which makes spikes grow out of the sick person's head and hands. He went on to explain that the disease can only be caught by not washing yourself enough. Being only 6 years old, Ramona believed him.
One time, Andy decided to prank call her cousin. She smiled and yelled,
"I'm watching you."
She sounded really scared as she replied,
"You saw what I was just doing?"
Andy said yes, and she went silent. Then she said in a shaky voice,
"Please don't tell my parents. I was masturbating."
Andy hung up on her, but after a week or two, she saw her cousin, who didn't know it was her on the phone.
When Spincess was 12, she had pretty bad acne and washed her face with soap while wearing a pink bandana so her hair wouldn't get wet. One night, she came home from a Halloween party with her face painted like Spider-Man. It was late, so she went to the bathroom and got undressed. As she was pouring soap on her hands, her brother walked in and saw her standing naked, wearing a pink bandana with her face painted as Spider-Man and soap all over her hands. As if that wasn't embarrassing enough, her brother decided to tell her, "If you want to masturbate properly, use Vaseline," and then proceeded to hand her a Vaseline bottle. She never leaves the door unlocked anymore.
It was Gooby's second year of high school, and she went to one of the most popular academies in her area. The whole school is an anti-bullying school, and the students rarely get picked on because if they do, they get sent straight home and suspended. It's a very strict place. But at that time, Gooby was a perky, friendly girl and always wore a smile that could light up a room. So when Gooby couldn't find a jacket to wear on a rainy day, she went with her black and gray Fall Out Boy jacket. The sleeves were black while the rest was gray, except for the giant black skull on the back of it, and in the front, Fall Out Boy was written on it. She wore it to school, and right when Gooby stepped onto campus, a teacher stopped her. The teacher said that she needed to take that jacket off right away because it violated the dress code. The only dress code Gooby could find at her school was no wearing short skirts or really short skirts and shirt dress. And also no skin showing clothes unless they didn't violate the dress code. The teacher told Gooby that she would be a target for bullies because of her gothic and soul-lowering outfit. It was one jacket! Gooby was told to take off the jacket and serve lunch detention.
On his first day at McDonald's, Helbin had a man come through the drive-thru who told him that his wife was a few cars behind him. He went on to tell Helbin that he would pay him a little extra if he spit in his wife's food. So, Helbin asked his co-worker friend to do the deed instead. Laughing, his friend agreed to do it in his place. Despite not doing it, Helbin still got to keep the $10 the man gave him.
Michaelim's weirdest secret is that when he was a kid, he would love to do nothing more than go for walks and be amongst nature. The weirdest part was that he would find a nice empty park, sit down and tear lumps of grass out of the ground and then eat them. Sometimes he'd come across a worm, which he would pick up, kiss on its head, or ass or whatever, and then throw it into the other side of the park. He would then walk home with his belly full of grass and a smile on his face.
When Dolan was 10 years old, his mom had to work late one night and found a babysitter online. When the babysitter arrived, she said hi, but she had a pretty weird grin on her face. Later on, Dolan was in his room playing video games, and he could hear the babysitter talking in the next room. He assumed she was on her phone. Half an hour passed, and he went down to the living room, but froze in shock. The babysitter was crawling like a spider on the ground, and when he asked if she was okay, she started mumbling in this weird voice like a demon. Dolan ran back to his room and called the police. When the officer arrived, the babysitter stabbed him with a knife. And when the second officer came, he quickly shot the babysitter dead. His mom never worked a night shift again.
Nixium was 3 and his brother was 5 when they decided to watch a scary movie one night. After watching it, they went to bed. Nixium ended up having a weird dream where he was at his grandma's house, and the villain from the scary movie was with him. The villain had the ability to shoot big blue orbs that would kill on contact. As soon as Nixium realized that he was dreaming, he saw his brother in a corner. He shouted,
"It's okay. It's only a dream. And if it is really you, scream, blanket poop when you wake up."
Together, they attacked the villain and then woke up. His brother ran into his bedroom and shouted, Liquid poop! Nixium freaked out.
The weirdest thing I ever had a family member do was being a wrapper sniffer. He was a pretty weird guy. He'd always sniff the wrappers off chocolate, candy, bread, anything that had a wrapper, or anything that was even wrapped in something. Aluminum foil if it was wrapped, only if it was wrapped specifically too. He would sniff it, and he would always say, "Oh, chocolate. Oh, use the food in a wrapper." It was pretty weird when he came along, because always at the end of the day, he'd always ask, "Please, please, let me sniff your wrappers, baby." A true wrapper sniffer indeed.
One day, Nixiam was sitting on his porch when two guys ran past his house. Both boys wore blue jeans and bright colored shirts, while Nixiam wore all black. A couple of seconds later, two cops ran past his house, but one stopped and ran towards him. He dragged Nixiam off the porch and put him against his car and began to pat him down. Every time he tried to say something, the cop told him to shut up. The cop found nothing, but still called for backup multiple times. There ended up being a total of 6 police cars in front of Nixiam's house, but they were all confused except for the cop who grabbed him. They talked to Nixiam for over an hour, asking if he was with the two boys who ran past his house earlier. He answered,
"No, I'm not even wearing any shoes."
Even though the cops thought he should be let go, the cop who grabbed Nixiam thought he knew him from somewhere and looked suspicious, so he brought him down to the station. On the way, Nixiam asked the cop why. The cop said it was because he was wearing all black.
When Pringle was little, he believed that all the planets we have today in our solar system used to be combined together as one gigantic planet. As rocks and debris hit the giant planet, it gradually broke into the solar system we have now, and the remnant from one of the planets was what caused the dinosaur extinction.
Hellbent used to work at a gas station. One day a man came in to use the bathroom. It was locked, so the guy asked Hellbent if he could use the key. Hellbent told him that there wasn't a key, and that if it was locked, it meant someone was in there already. The guy couldn't quite grasp this, so he said, "What? The bathroom knows when someone's in there? How?" Hellbent had to explain to him that it wasn't some magical toilet with artificial intelligence, and that customers go in there and lock the door behind them. The man looked at Hellbent for 5 painfully long seconds and then said, "Oh."
Nixium's first date with his girlfriend was spending the night at his home, but his weird stepmother just would not leave them alone. She kept giving them a perverted stare. Eventually, they went to a nearby park to avoid her. They were making out on a bench when they heard camera shutter noises. His stepmother had climbed up a pine tree and was taking pictures of them. They left the park and she followed them in a car. Nixium finally told her to fuck off and she drove home. After Nixium's girlfriend went home, the perverted stepmother kept asking him questions like, "How was it? How far did you go? Will she be back? What did she taste like?"
When Zaragamba was 19, he worked at a Greek place. One time, he had to go on a highway while wearing a hot dog suit. The owner, who was probably on crack, decided that Zaragamba was the best fit to stand in the road, waving a huge sign that could have been a major catastrophe. His foot ended up getting run over, and he was paid triple that month for workers' compensation. His foot still has a mild twitch when he walks.
Everyone loves freshly baked bread, but some of us love it more than others. My friend Andy has a deep and dark and a bready secret. Whenever she sees bread, she can't help but notice how soft it is. She fantasizes about laying on a big fluffy loaf of bread, and she'll often draw pictures of characters doing this. The worst part is, sometimes Andy will just stare at bread. If her friends or family catch her like this, she has to pretend she's just zoning out. Andy desperately wants to hug a bread loaf, but this would make her look like a freak. And besides that, she doesn't like the idea of having to clean off all those crumbs.
When Tulip was about 5 or 6 years old, he was walking down the road with his mom and little sister to one of his mom's friend's house. He decided to run ahead and wait for them there. However, he'd forgotten that his mom's friend had an unfriendly dog. Just as he was getting there, the dog jumped outside and started chasing after him. As soon as Tulip heard him bark and saw him, he ran like hell, fast as he ever ran. He didn't look back at all while he was running, but he could feel the dog's presence behind him the whole time. Then the dog lunged at Tulip and managed to barely get him by his sweater. The dog ripped a hole in it, but luckily Tulip got away and ran towards his mom, who chased the dog away.
One time, Pandora dated a guy for about 6 months. He had a lot of issues, and Pandora eventually got sick of him and ended the relationship. She later found out that he'd been going around telling everyone that Pandora had a miscarriage, and that the stress of losing their baby was what broke them up. This was completely untrue, and Pandora had never been pregnant. He even told Pandora's 12-year-old sister about this imaginary pregnancy 3 months before they broke up. He told her it was a secret, and that she had to keep it to herself. When Pandora found out, she screamed at him and told him to get some psychological help.
Hellbent woke up at around 2 a.m. and realized he could hear a faint music box. He got up and he went to the attic to check it out, and he found a bizarre-looking creature sitting in the moonlight. It was a tall, alien-like girl with short gray hair, a pink dress, and scars around her throat and legs. She also had no eyes, just sockets, with blood pouring out of them. She was tampering with the music box and looked up to see Hellbent. "Can you help me? Please?" Her fingers were connected and looked like claws. She had trouble winding up the music box. Hellbent just panicked and ran back to his room, slamming the door behind him.
The cringiest thing Dolan ever heard someone say was when he was in 6th grade. There was a boy who ran around the classroom and said the most cringe-worthy, creepy stuff. One time, the boy ran up to a group of girls and whispered, "Wanna taste my nipple?" Another time he said, "I bet your lady bits taste like Fruit Loops." Every day, Dolan and the other boys in their class would watch as the boy harassed all the girls. It continued until Dolan and his friend Sid went to the office and told the principal. The boy was suspended for 3 days.
Legna and his girlfriend were at his place watching a movie. He was laying on his bed and she was resting her head on his stomach. Legna fell asleep and ripped out a tremendous fart. His girlfriend slapped him, waking him up, but Legna didn't know what was going on and the slap woke him up into fight mode. So on instinct, Legna threw a counter punch. The next thing Legna knew, he was single. Spinal Palm was given detention when he was told that it was time to get off the school's computer. He replied,
"Oh sure, just let me say my work."
Just then the teacher unplugged the machine. Back then there was no such thing as autosave, so his entire report was lost. When they told him he was not getting an extension to do it again, Spinal Palm ended up giving up on school. From that day forward, he didn't cooperate with any of them, didn't turn in any homework, and graduated with Fs. And now he draws cartoons for the internet.
One time, Doopy and her family took a trip to Reno. They were staying at a fancy hotel and spent most of their time in the pool. One afternoon, Doopy was swimming laps when she came across a lizard hanging out by the edge of the pool. Being young and curious, Doopy wondered what would happen if she dribbled spit onto its head, and so she did it. The lizard took it like a champ and barely reacted at all. Once her experiment was complete, Doopy looked up and saw a leathery-skinned fat couple watching her from their sunbeds. They looked disgusted. Doopy suddenly felt really embarrassed. She learned an important lesson that day. Normal people do not dribble on lizards.